Welcome to The Advisor with Stacey Chillemi, the show where we dive deep into the stories that matter and unravel the complexities shaping everyday life. Today, we're taking a closer look at the case that that stirred up conversation about ethics, accountability, and trust in healthcare. Michelle Davies faced a conviction for falsely claiming to be an osteopath, a legal and professional breach that has profound implications for both practitioners and patients alike. In this episode, we aim to uncover the lessons from the case and explore what it means in the healthcare community moving forward. So let's jump into this because this is an amazing story and it really opens the eyes to a lot of people. Michelle, can you walk us through the timeline of events that led to the conviction and what were the key moments and decisions involved?
Thank you very much for having me, Stacey. This is exciting for me to be talking about it because it puts a different spin to it. Because it could be seen as very negative and
Mhm.
emotional. But the truth is that the case that I went through over a period of 3 years, it was a 3-year persecution by the regulator and the courts against me. But it is a case of an abuse of court process, an abuse of process from the regulator. It has been a breach of natural justice and it's misfeasance. And people don't know that because I haven't been given an opportunity to put the record straight. So this is an opportunity for me to be able to do that after 3 years of a trial. But it was probably about year two of the trial that then it was this criminal conviction, and that was for impersonating an osteopath on my website, which is a criminal offense if you are impersonating an osteopath. But really, it's the law is there to protect the public from someone who is pretending to be an osteopath
Right.
or someone who has actually, harmed the public in some way. And it's something that's taken seriously, and it should be. And the public obviously should be protected by people that would harm them. So I get it, but I hadn't done anything wrong. And so I hadn't harmed any patient. And I've been working now for 28 years in private practice, and not one complaint against me from any member of the public, any patient, any colleague, anyone. And so they didn't need to protect the public from me. But,
Right.
at times they need to protect the public. And that, yeah, so we need to unravel that, I suppose, and talk about that in more detail. And, how did that come to be? How did I come to be in that position of having this conviction made against me?
100%.
Mm.
For those who are unfamiliar, what does it mean to be legally identified as practicing osteopath, and what standards are expected from professionals in this field?
So when you're an osteopath, you have to do continuing professional development. That's one thing. And you have to follow a code of practice.
Mhm.
And I was completely doing that, and I've always done that. In fact, the minimum of continuing professional development is 30 hours. I would
Yeah.
some years be doing 90 hours. And I was following the code of conduct completely, or always did. There was never an issue over that. But yes, to be an osteopath, you have to follow this particular code, which is there for a reason to protect the public. So the regulator, the General Osteopathic Council, are in place to protect the public from any
Great.
harm. Yeah. And you just
Now,
need to comply to those rules.
what has this ordeal taught you about the importance of professional integrity in the healthcare system?
Within the healthcare system, or within the authorities, there is no integrity. I have complete integrity, but what I have seen is a complete lack of integrity within the authorities and within the court. And it's a disgrace. And it's been really upsetting to see that because I really did believe that there would be a process that would be followed and it would
Right.
protect my rights as a woman. And I did not see that. And now I have no trust whatsoever in the authorities or government as a result, because I've seen it firsthand how I have been treated and how others have been treated as well within the profession. Everything has been unfair and unjust. And you can't have a system, a judicial system, that is then corrupt and doesn't protect your rights. But that's what I've witnessed over 3 years. Now I see no integrity in the system at all.
And can you tell us a little more about what happened and how this made you feel? Because I can't even imagine being falsely accused of something and then having to go through, the legal system and then your reputation is at stake and all this hard work and you're so passionate about what you do and you do it so well and then you're falsely acclaimed of something. I'm sure you felt embarrassment. I'm sure you felt anger. I'm sure you felt fear, all these things that just came at you, and then having to fight for your rights and having to fight for to protect who you are as a person, and not have you dedicated your entire life to this, and then people who don't even know you are falsely making these accusations, and they're trying to destroy everything you worked so hard to build. Can you tell us a little bit about, what happened and what you went through, and the emotions, and how you're dealing with it and how you dealt with it previously?
Yeah, so it created such a lot of anxiety and fear and panic. It was deeply, deeply upsetting and hurtful and traumatic. And I had to navigate my way through those emotions. I actually did what I tell patients to do, what I recommend patients to do. I followed everything that I would advise somebody else. And I can say that all of it worked because I managed to be able to stand on trial on 12 trial days without a legal team, without a barrister. I represented myself standing against, a room of 10 people, which were all against me, nobody for me, no one stood by my side. And I had to be calm in that situation. And so I used remedies and I used AO scan technology. I listened to my inner voice and I played music to be able to balance my emotional state so that I could act confidently and be able to process the questions that were being asked so that I could answer appropriately as well without getting emotional, because of course I was emotional, but I
Yeah,
couldn't really let that run the case. I had to come from a place of serenity in a way, and I did well. Yes, I did. I did manage it, but it was really difficult to do. But I see everything really as an opportunity for growth. And so
yes,
that's how I saw it. And it was also an opportunity for me to completely rely upon my relationship with my creator, with God the Almighty. And that was incredible because I did 100% have to rely upon that relationship. And I wouldn't have got through it unless I relied upon the Almighty to help me through. I use scripture and I use the Bible as well. And as a result of that, I am so much closer to the creator. And now I just feel unbreakable, unstoppable, because God was there for me. And I was against massive adversity
yeah,
and I got through it. And I think when you go through something like that, a persecution of 3 years, and you know that you're right, and you know that you're being truthful and authentic, but you're being still tortured as a result.
yes.
Um, but it just, yeah. So my love for God and my gratitude towards God um, is just huge now. So, and that brings me so much joy. Like my life now has changed for the better because of that. And also then you feeling the support from a community as well of patients and the public that were supporting me. That meant such a lot. I invited the public to my hearings, to my trial days, and I had so much interest. In fact, there was abusive process there as well because they wouldn't let the people in to the hearings They weren't answering the phone. They weren't replying to emails to let people in on the trial day. They limited the number. It was so small in the end. But I still knew the number of people that wanted to be there to support me. And that meant such a lot. And I go to a fellowship meeting, a group as well. And, I had their love and support. So I felt where I was supported in that regard as well. And that was beautiful. So on the one hand, there was all this trauma, but on the other hand, then I had this closeness with the creator and with the community and the public. So that was actually very beautiful.
I think it's so important to be able to have a relationship, with, whatever faith you are, to be able to have the relationship with either God or whoever you believe in. You need faith of some sort to get you through the tough times. And I feel it's so important to have that faith. Faith is so powerful because, there is something above. I truly believe, we didn't get here by a bunch of craters, just pushing together and forming Earth, there's more to it. And, I think faith is such a powerful way of, getting through the crises. And it's so important to have that support too. Many people, when they go through crisis, they feel alone. And, a lot of people get stuck in life and they have a very hard time getting through crisis because they feel alone. So what you did by going and getting support and finding people to be by your side is so important. It plays such a huge role. Do you think you would have been able to survive and get through it if you didn't have the support that you had?
No, definitely not. No. And there were news headlines in my local area. All of the newspapers locally were reporting on this case, this criminal conviction.
Yeah.
Michelle Davies, criminally convicted, Michelle Davies in the dock, Michelle Davies claiming to be an osteopath and she's not. It's very damning, very harmful. And, I would read the headline and just feel terrible. It was such an attack on my reputation, and I hadn't harmed anyone. But
Yeah.
what was beautiful about it then was there was this community of people that were actually like my soldiers coming, this spiritual warfare, which I think it was. And I
Yeah.
had this army that were then reporting into the newspaper. They had like a section for comments. And I had so many people commenting on my behalf and
Yeah.
protecting me. And that was incredible to feel that because I couldn't always be the one, and also it wasn't right really for me to be the one, commenting back in the newspaper articles. It,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been right if it was just me.
Yeah.
So I had so many people that were doing that on my behalf, and that showed me a huge amount of love and support for the stance that I was taking in this spiritual warfare because it did feel like it was good against evil. And
Yes.
so then I did have this community supporting me. And I just love reading those comments. And
I,
equally, before I even got to that point, I collected 100 witness statements of
wow.
patients. They actually wrote a statement, they signed it, they put their name and address to it. And it was a statement to say that Michelle Davies is safe and she is professional and she communicates well and she makes a difference to my life and to my family's lives, etc. And I had over 100 of those witness
Wow.
statements. And then I had someone pretty much from every profession write as well on their behalf saying that I was safe, and there was nothing wrong with the way that I conducted myself. And I even had a QC, Queen's Counsel member. I had head teachers, and I had solicitors and orthopedic surgeons and radiographers. And there was somebody from most professions that you would know that also wrote in as well as a statement to say that Michelle is great and she's safe. So obviously I could feel all of that love as well and support. So that any time that I felt like I was tripping up and falling over with the kind of grief I was going through, equally
Yes.
then I was picked back up again by reading somebody's statement that they had written. And I've got hundreds of testimonials as well, that were so supportive of me going through that trial. I had to do what I had to do. You know, I had to be standing on truth, which is what God is. God is all about truth.
Yes.
And because my only authority is God and nobody else, and
Right.
because if I obviously, when your authority is God, you know you're not going to harm anyone. So I
Yeah.
that's what I do. I don't harm anyone. I don't break the law because I'm not going
Yeah.
to harm anyone. But this was a case of the legal system, not law.
Yes.
There's two different systems, and one is legal and one is law. And
Mm.
unfortunately, this was in the legal system, which really doesn't recognize God, doesn't recognize the authority of God within that system. So that's why there was this battle going on. But I just had to keep doing what I was doing, so that I could be my true, authentic self. And that's where the support came as well, because people knew that I was being authentic and truthful, and
Yes.
because they could feel it.
Yes.
And I gained much more support as well through podcasts and speaking about my trial, but like a year ago before it went to trial, because I was inviting the public to support me. So then I had this influx of new people that had never met me. They came to support me as well.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That would have been, it took so much pressure off my heart because, no matter what, the courts thought, when you get that support from others that believe in you and that you've helped and you know that you've done this for the right purpose and that you've helped others. So no matter what they think, you still know you've done right. You still know that you've helped all these individuals. You still know that people honor what you do and they respect you. And that goes so far. That goes so far. Now,
Yeah.
what happened as we go along in this story? Like, as you were in the courts, how did this progress and turn out?
So it should never have got to the court in the first place. If we like really rewind, the start of it was that I took a case against my regulator. So there was no case against me at this point. So the very first step in this path was 4 years ago now. But it was me bringing a claim against the regulator because they were restricting my scope of practice, and they actually had censored 75 testimonials on my website in order for me to comply. And so that I brought a case against them for harm, actually, because the regulator was actually now causing harm to the public by
Hmm.
me lying and deceiving the public about what I could actually do. Every consultation, I felt like I had got tape across my lips. I couldn't speak freely. So I brought the claim against them. And as a result of that, they then assumed or made this presumption that I was actually mentally unfit. And then they, as a result of that, you must be mentally unfit to take us on as a regulator, because I wasn't with a lawyer either. I did it by myself
Wow.
because I knew that it was unfair that I was treated that way. And
Mhm.
so they then said that you must be mentally unfit. We want full access to your medical records, and we also then want you to undergo psychiatric assessment.
My
What they
goodness.
could have done is they could have actually asked me for a sample of my case records to see, they could have come and interviewed patients. They could have, done a mystery shopper and come and turned up as a patient in my practice just to see how safe I was. But
Yeah.
no, they insisted on full psychiatric assessment and full access to medical records, of course, which I said no, because that is a breach of my rights. Plus,
Hmm.
I've not done anything anyway to harm anyone. So we are why. And I've brought the case against you anyway. So like you've completely turned it around just because you're the bully at this time. And you have
Yeah.
the so-called authority to do so because you're my regulator. Um, so I was suspended. So it was an interim suspension order because then I hadn't complied.
Yeah.
And I went to trial on that. And the trial went to then another trial. And they gave a final date of November 2021, 29th of November. The final case would be heard, and this interim suspension order would be dealt with. And it should
Right.
have been dealt with in November, December of 2021. and it didn't come to an end. So they didn't bring me to trial. Now, then what happened was that they said that they would update me in the new year. There was no update. Then they said
Wow.
they would update me, and again, there was no update. The update was, oh, we're now taking you to court for impersonating an osteopath on your website. That's how they dealt with it. So the court case came because they had nothing on me to have struck me off in December 2021.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they would have just done that. But why didn't they?
Yeah.
Because they could have just said, okay, well, you've done wrong. You haven't complied to your code of conduct, which would be to provide access to your medical records. Case closed. But they
Right.
didn't. They then waited, and then it was the August the following year. No update whatsoever, no warning either. Just you need to appear. We're summoning you to court as a criminal case because you have impersonated an osteopath on your website. And the Chiropractic Council warns the chiropractors that their website may be in breach. And that's fair. That's what should happen. The
Mhm.
General Osteopathic Council doesn't do that. There was no warning. And the
Wow.
only thing wrong with my website was that I'd used the word osteopath in my domain name, which was an oversight. There was everything else. I'd even made a summary on the very first page and through the website that said Michelle Davies is no longer a registered osteopath with the General Osteopathic Council. There is a suspension order against her and she's going through trial. And I wrote about it on my website. I've made it really,
Wow.
really clear that
Yeah.
I wasn't impersonating an osteopath, but I'd used the word osteopath in the domain name. So that's how the case came about for me impersonating an osteopath. And I had trained for 4 years to be an osteopath. This was back in 1994, and I
Yeah.
graduated in 1997 with a degree in osteopathy. And at that point, I'd practiced very safely
Yeah.
and continued to do my continuing professional development. And I even helped towards the profession and towards the regulator many, many times with using statistics from my practice to help the profession grow. So I did all
Yeah.
of that. And yeah, sorry, I've just completely lost my train of thought then.
You were
um,
talking, went through everything, and that you changed
yeah,
your website, and then
yes,
were moving on, and making sure that everything in your society, the people around you who were affiliated with you or could be affiliated with you, saw what was going on, that you weren't hiding anything from them. You were being very straightforward.
that's right. And with every new patient that came through my practice, I informed every single person I'm actually on an interim suspension order. That was incredibly hard to do that because
Yeah.
I didn't have to do that, but because I'm come from a point of truth and honesty and authenticity, I needed to. So for
Right.
every new patient that came through, it was a text message or an email or a conversation to say, I'm actually suspended. It's an interim suspension order. I'm going through this trial.
Right.
So I did everything I could have done, I think, to tell everyone I am not a registered osteopath. So then
Yeah.
to find myself in this trial. So then, where this abusive process as well came in, not just that, because I hadn't been given an opportunity. There was no warning at all
Yeah.
that I could have just easily changed my website and it would have been done with. Fine, didn't even need to go to court. But there was
Hmm.
no warning. So I go to the magistrates court locally, and I am partly there to test the integrity of the judge who's in front of me as well, because
Yeah.
I'm completely distrusting the system. So I'm
Mhm.
going with the intention of testing his integrity. And that was meant to be a management hearing. So there's a management hearing before you go to the court hearing. The management hearing turned out to then be the actual court hearing. That's wrong. That shouldn't happen. That's abusive process.
No.
And I don't have any legal assistance with me either. So I'm not at this point in time, I'm not even aware of what's going on because I don't know.
Right.
Um, then the prosecutor, who is on the General Osteopathic Council side, he then acts as the witness in the case. He reads the witness statement. So he is the prosecutor and he's the witness as well.
Oh my
That is
goodness.
abusive process. This is a criminal case. You're not allowed to do that. But he did. And again, more distrust in the system because that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. And
No.
he was an interloper. And I remember saying in trial, you are being an interloper. You're not allowed
Mhm.
to do this. You know, you're the prosecutor, you can't also be the witness. But anyway, it was
Yes.
just ignored. So I was found guilty. Um,
Wow.
and then I went to appeal that. Now, at the appeal, a part of the appeal before I went into the court,
Mhm.
two things, two abuse of process here. They, I did have a legal advisor at this point, or he was my jurisdiction witness,
Mhm.
and he would have been there then to protect my rights. And he did protect my rights in the case that they actually took me to when I came in through the courtroom, they took me to the back of the court and they actually locked me in a cage with
God.
a court member of staff holding the keys, as if I was a criminal and I had committed some criminal offense, like killed someone or something. I mean, why are you going to put me in a locked cage, which is where I would have been trialed in there?
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
Using a word on my the word osteopath on my website. So I had to compose myself through that as well. In fact, what I did is I just laughed. I laughed because that was my way, I suppose, of being able to just not take it so seriously and be able to get through it, get some stress off me. Because it's not very nice to be locked in a cage with someone holding the keys.
No.
Um,
Oh,
anyway, the jurisdiction witness was able to get me out of that situation. He said for my rights, for me that I should be out of there. So he did. That was great. Managed to do that. He then said to me to go to the front and sit actually on the front row on the same pew as the prosecutor, which normally doesn't happen, but he was there to protect my rights and keep equity,
mhm.
equality on the bench. Now,
Right.
what happened? He was meant to be with me in that trial to support me, but also to test the integrity again of the judge. Now, what happened next? He was falsely accused of assaulting a member of the court staff and arrested. And it was
No.
all false, falsely accused of assault by battery to the court staff. Now, I was with him for the entire time. This is a man also on end stage kidney failure. He's on dialysis. He's in his 70s.
Oh my
So
goodness.
they falsely accused him of assault by battery. Two police vans, six police officers came and had him removed, leaving me completely defenseless because I didn't have anyone then to help guide me through this the appeal of this conviction. So I'm then concerned for his health and his safety because they've taken him away
Yeah.
and he's on kidney dialysis. He also has a certain diet that he needs to keep.
Yeah.
His with his fluids and his food,
Oh, yeah.
certain things he can't eat and drink.
Right.
So in this process of this happening, we're not in the trial room at this point now.
Yeah.
I'm then interviewed by the police officer for what's just happened, this assault that's just not actually happened. So rather than me focusing on what am I going to say in this case against me on trial, I'm worrying. I'm going over to the police station. I'm trying to find out the welfare of this jurisdiction witness
Oh, wow.
for his sake. I'm really, really worried about him and his health.
Yeah.
And also, I'm then being interviewed for this false arrest. And then I get
Right.
called into the trial. um, yeah. So,
They treated you like you were a murderer. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. All because
yeah,
of the one word that you used, they
yes,
could have easily just asked you to change it. That's what
yes,
normally, that's what they legally were supposed to do is just ask you to change it. And if you don't change it, then you could have a problem. But, before any of this happened, all they needed to do is just say, you can't use this word, please use this word, please change this, and that's all you needed to do, and then if you don't change it, there could be consequences. But if you just change it freely on your own will, nothing of this should have happened.
no.
Oh my
So
goodness. So
you can only see it as a persecution against me.
yeah. So
All
how
of it,
did
even the court, arresting my jurisdiction witness for falsely assaulting someone when he did not assault anyone.
a 70-year-old on dialysis? That blows my mind.
Then
So
they
how
released him from the prison, the police cell at midnight, and he had to find his way home to the other side of the country. He wasn't local.
oh wow.
Yeah, it was like a 4.5 hour journey, should have been. He arrived
Yeah.
home after 8 o'clock the next morning because there weren't trains running through the night. And he had dialysis at 8 a.m. the next day, which
Oh,
he partly missed his dialysis as well because of that. And what's
oh,
interesting is nothing has happened since then. So again, just demonstrates the lack of integrity within the court system because nothing has actually happened to him, as in he hasn't been brought to trial. There's been no trial. So apparently, this assault, if they did have evidence of an assault, then it would have been brought to a trial, and it hasn't, because there was no evidence of him assaulting anyone.
no. They
I was just
actually,
rendered defenseless within that hearing. So I was found guilty of impersonating an osteopath, then I had to pay a fine. So I had to pay two fines. The criminal conviction was 6 months, like a driving offence, that's all. And so you pay a fine 6 months, and then after 6 months, it's wiped. So I don't have a criminal conviction. There isn't anything there's nothing on me that says that I have had a criminal conviction because it was spent, as they call it, a bit like a
oh,
driving offence. But
yeah.
still, now to this day, the headlines, you can Google my name and the headlines are there. So still, I am affected by that, even though it was spent within 6 months, because I will still have patients now that won't come to see me because they're fearful of the criminal conviction. And it's so unfair. And the local newspapers would never print my story. I asked them to interview me. Other patients and friends and family wrote to the newspaper as well and said, "This is so unfair. You need to hear the full story. You need to
Yeah.
print the story." And they didn't. And I had one opportunity for 2 minutes to give a defense over a phone call. That was
Wow.
it after 3 years of the same editor as well, or the person who writes the newspaper article, the same person didn't give me an opportunity apart from 2 minutes, which most of that 2 minutes I was so cross with him. Like, you're giving me 2 minutes of your time with all this bad press against me. Surely you feel that you should give me longer than that to
I,
defend myself and give me an opportunity at least to say more, or to even think about how to respond to the headline that you're about to print. It was
oh
just
my,
awful, and it's still awful because they won't print my story.
that's crazy. If I were
Yeah.
you, I would the people who printed the story, that talks wrongly about you. I would actually contact them and tell them that that you were falsely accused. Please remove this, because it's not fair that you suffer for something that you didn't do.
But I think it's because the truth of, because of I use the word osteopath on as a domain name, they found me guilty. So the reporter would say, all we're doing is printing the case. That is actually what their response is.
Ugh, that's terrible.
What would
Now,
be fair would be give me the opportunity to actually, run an article on actually what I'm talking about today, the full story, the full history behind it, rather than
yes.
make out that I'm actually a criminal and that I could potentially harm people, which I've never done.
Oh, that is horrible. Now, looking back, what would you have done differently to avoid this situation? Is there anything that you think back? Because I'm sure you asked yourself questions like, I could have done this, I should have done this, why didn't I do this? We always do that as humans. We try to look back, we try to reanalyze the situation. What could I have done differently? Did you go through that process at all?
No,
You knew,
I actually, no. I would do the same thing again because it was truthful and honest.
right.
And what I've gained as a result of that is far greater than if I did do it a different way. And the testament of that is that I am now working in Harley Street in London. which is the most prestigious address for health workers to work. And that's where I am as a result of taking this stance. And my relationship with God is incredible. And the healing that happens with my hands working with someone to promote a healing response within someone, it's miracles after miracles after miracles. And I believe that where I am now is because of the action that I took for 3 years and the persecution and being able to fight back on
Yeah.
God's name. Um, so no, I actually I wouldn't have done things in a different way.
It seems
Oh,
like
it's
it made,
horrible. I wouldn't really want to repeat it, of course, because it's so traumatic. But then yeah, I had to also work on forgiveness,
yeah,
acceptance and forgiveness. The people that were persecuting me, I felt so much anger towards them individually. I felt a lot of
yes,
anger towards the regulator and to the court staff and to the prosecutor. And I had to come to a place of peace with that and forgiveness as well. And I worked hard on that um, to the point where then I just felt love and actually sending my opponents love. But that's the point that I got to, and I needed to do that. And I think also that's just important for anyone, I think, isn't it? It's massive to be able to forgive someone who's hurt you and you feel like it's not justified, it's unfair. But when you
yeah,
get to that point where you have actually forgiven and you've moved on and you feel stronger as a result, which I do,
yeah.
it's also pretty beautiful that I've experienced that as well.
Oh, definitely. It seems like, sometimes we go through these things in life and we say, why me? Why me? But, a lot of times I think everything happens for a reason. And, it seems like it made you a better person in many ways. It gave you strength, it gave you wisdom, it gave you courage, it gave you hope. It taught you forgiveness, and, you became a better person throughout this. And it's given you the knowledge also to be able to understand lots of things you probably didn't understand before in all areas of life. Now, what advice, this happens all the place, all over the world. People are wrongfully accused for a lot of things, and it happened to you, and it happens to thousands of individuals, your country, the United States, all over the world, people are wrongfully accused. What advice do you have for people going through similar situations where they're being wrongfully accused of some type of legal issue?
It's the hardest, it's almost the hardest piece of advice to give someone because it feels as though it's not compassionate. But I feel that if you're being wrongly accused, you have to come to the point of forgiveness to that person. And that I know could be really upsetting for people to hear that, even me saying it, because I see we're talking about many different cases, aren't we, as well? So, but as a whole, it's the best advice I would give is to come to that point of forgiveness,
Mhm.
because if you don't get to the point of forgiveness, it hurts you. And
Yeah,
it's you that's being hurt. So if I didn't get to the point of forgiveness, I would have continued to hurt and damage and cause more trauma to myself because the person isn't receiving from me all the anger that I've got anyway. It's only coming back at me. So then
mhm.
I'm poisoning my own body by having those feelings of anger towards that person that is completely unaware of how I'm feeling about them anyway. So I would say to come to the point of, if you can, really feel it in your heart to forgive. And that could take years for some people to be able to reach that point of forgiveness, years
Yes,
and years. But the day that you get to that point where you forgive, you're released of that
yes,
heavy burden, which is just so poisonous to the body. I know these things because I've studied the science also of medicine, illness
yeah,
and disease, and
yeah,
they know that anger creates toxicity in the body. You only look at the sweat of someone who's angry and it's full of poison. And so because I realized that, I knew that I had to let it go. I couldn't keep feeling angry and I couldn't be the victim either. I needed to be the victor, completely
yes.
just be in my power and let it all go, so that I could be at a peaceful place. And also, I didn't. also important. I didn't want any of my negativity to come across into anyone else, into anyone's session of healing either. So I was
Right.
working on myself continuously.
Wow, that's powerful. Now, if you had to take today's conversation and you wanted to emphasize on some important factors, what are some things that you want the listeners to walk away with?
I would say always be your true, authentic self because it is the highest frequency that you can be in. And when you're in your highest frequency, you are creative and you're intuitive
Yes,
and you receive abundance of everything. But you only get there with being authentic and speaking your truth. So I would say that.
I love that. Now, where can people find you if they'd like to contact you and talk to you?
Healingwithmichelledavies.com.
I love it. And before we go, can you tell people about the services that you provide also?
Thank you. Yes. I work with AO scan technology and I run the Inner Voice and Easy Scan and Mind Sync. And also, I do virtual consultations and I do in-person consultations. And I have published two books. The first book is the Whistleblower book, where it contains all of the testimonials that were censored. So the public voice is restored within the book. And
Yes.
that book is called Miracle Worker. Enlightened Rebel Osteopath is the subtitle. And the other book is called Mental Clarity. So those are the services that I offer.
And where can people find your books?
Amazon, that's
Okay,
probably the easiest place, but you can find them in bookstores and many other websites as well.
great.
They've got
And
their
so,
own, Miracle Workers actually got its own website through Balboa Press.
oh, really? Wonderful.
Mm.
And once again, tell everybody your website. I want to make sure they get it in their head again.
Thank you. Healingwithmichelledavies.com.
I love it. This has been amazing. I'm so glad you shared your story because there are so many people out there that go through similar situations. And even if they have just one portion of your story they could relate to, it could change somebody's life. And I think the truth really needs to get out. And something like this could, wake up people too, because it really affects people to be wrongfully accused of something. And it puts, sometimes people just, work on the other side of that and they don't realize, when they wrongfully accuse someone, they don't realize the impact, what they're putting that person through. And, before accusations are made, people really need to think about how it's going to affect the other person and what it's going to put that other person through if they make this accusation and really do their homework before they actually go out and just make an accusation and and bring it to the level where it gets so severe like it did for you. People sometimes they don't care and they just make decisions and it doesn't affect them, so why do they care? Well, they should care. That's our justice system should care. So when people accuse people of things, really, they should really do their homework before they bring it to a level where it gets so serious like it did for you, or any level, because there are hundreds and thousands of people that are wrongfully accused on a yearly basis. And, we really need to wake up and really look at our judicial system and really start to make some changes on when we, how we run it and, the way it's run and, and who has the authority to do what, because there definitely needs, our system needs to be changed, and not just in the US, but in your country and many other countries also. So I'm glad you came forward to share this story. And I am 100% sure that your story is going to make a huge impact on other people's lives. And I thank you just for having the courage to share it. Yeah, that is wonderful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Stacey. Really appreciate it. Thank
Oh, you're
you.
very welcome. And I just want to let everybody know that Michelle has her own podcast channel, and she is under the advisor. If you go and you type in her name, her podcast will show up, and you can see her episodes. And she has beautiful episodes about what she does, her healing, and great advice on how to heal your body, and and this story as well. So check out her podcasts, share them, like them, and and contact Michelle, because she has wonderful things that she could show you and teach you, and she's here for you. So thank you so much for coming and listening to the show. And if you like this channel, follow it and subscribe, and listen to Michelle's podcast episodes, and listen to The Advisor, where we could help you improve your life in all areas of your life. Thank you so much, and have a great day.